We are here at Old Arizona on the White Stallion Ranch in Tucson, Arizona. We have with us today Mark Headley, who has been a film producer and in the film industry for just about his entire life. And we're going to hear a lot about that today. We're also going to touch a little bit on the Senate Bill 1708 and the tax film credits. But we're here mostly to hear what Mark has had to experience in not having that going on in the state of Arizona and how the industry has struggled. So, okay. Mark, let's hear it.
Well, basically, John, it all started when I was 14 years old, and a friend of mine invited me to the set of Lilies of the Field.
Mm-hmm.
And
where was that filmed at?
It was around Old Tucson.
Okay.
You know, middle of the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And a young black actor, Sidney Poitier,
Mm-hmm.
we became friends,
Mm-hmm.
and he showed me around the set, and that's when I more or less fell in love with the whole film thing. Later, Sidney, we found out, I was on the Tucson Film Commission with
Mm-hmm.
Bob Shelton, and we found out that Sidney was directing his first feature film.
Mm.
I went to Los Angeles, had lunch with Sidney, and convinced him to come to Tucson to check it out.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Stir Crazy
Mm.
with Richard Pryor, Gene Wilder. And a lot of people are familiar with the chicken scene that was filmed with Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder. And that was actually currently the Chase, but it used to be the Valley National Bank in downtown Tucson.
Mm.
So, through the Film Commission, back in the day, there were so many films because, of course, a lot of Westerns, Bob Shelton, would make constant trips to Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And I was an extra in a lot of films, Monty Walsh with Lee Marvin, and which was filmed at Mescal.
Mm-hmm.
And Life and Time as Judge Roy Bean, got to work with Paul Newman. So I just more or less grew up with the film industry
Mm-hmm.
in Tucson, but in order to grow, I moved to Los Angeles in the mid-'80s
Mm-hmm.
and started producing.
Mm-hmm.
And but I'm back in Tucson because I've been here about 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
because I believe that the film industry can and will return.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been talking about the excitement of the 1708, the bill up in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And if that passes, the governor's gung-ho on it. That's going to be more or less be a renaissance
Mm-hmm.
for the film industry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're all collectively working for. And I really appreciate all the work and time you've been putting into it. And especially with the set that's behind us,
Mhm.
The big saloon. So it's just, it's a fun, exciting industry.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're actually making money, it's even more fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, the struggles that the professionals that are in this region and what they have gone through to comparatively get by, and where you stuck it out. You've done everything you can to figure it out, stick it out, and if anybody is deserving of what is going to come, it's you and the other people that you have been working with all these years in the hopes that this renaissance could occur. And I believe that it's going to come too. I am glad you're still here. I'm sure that you have talked about getting out of here yourself. I know that you have had some experience in going into, I think it was Georgia or Louisiana some years ago.
Yeah, actually, I did a project in Georgia, which
Mhm.
was great. They had a tax incentive. A friend of mine back in Los Angeles, I'm a member of the Directors Guild, and Taylor Hackford, past president of the Directors Guild, back in the 90s, we were having a cocktail reception at the Directors Guild in Los Angeles, and he was talking very excited about this new thing that came up, which was called a tax incentive. He just finished a film in
What
Louisiana.
year was that?
God, that was probably 2003.
So was
Yeah.
that as a result of Canada creating the tax
Yes.
incentive, and then everybody else going, what are they doing up there? We better get with this.
Yeah.
They sucked it all out of the whole
Well, actually,
country.
at the Directors Guild, we were very concerned that we called it runaway production.
Yeah.
Canada was taking, because of their new tax incentive, they were up there taking about, we figured, $9 billion a year
Gee.
in runaway production,
Mhm.
companies going up there. So Taylor Hackford and a group of us formed a committee called the Runaway Production Committee at the Directors Guild, and we discovered that the two states, Louisiana, and Taylor was very excited because he did a film called Ray, which got the Academy Award. He got $6 million back on his budget.
Gee.
So that was very exciting for him. And the only two states was Louisiana and New Mexico. And through our efforts...
They actually started the tax credit back when?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah, yeah. So they started doing it. And, you know, we decided at the Directors Guild...
Even before California?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Well, California resisted because they thought, oh, you know, there's going to be no... we're going to be making movies forever. You know, people aren't going to be leaving. But we started working, we attempted to work with California. They weren't really into it, the legislature, because they have a Northern California and a Southern California. And Northern California hates Southern California. so they had a really hard time. But when they started seeing other states do tax incentives like Georgia, Michigan, Texas, and people started leaving. Now they have, I guess about 7 or 8 years ago, they did start a tax incentive. You know, the rest is history. And hopefully this 1708 will happen here in Arizona, because here's the advantages. We're so close. We're 7.5 hour drive, you know, from Los Angeles, Hollywood to here.
Right.
Okay. So many people still love Southern Arizona. Jerry Bruckheimer went to the U of A here, okay, major producer. The second man in command at Netflix, Scott Stubler, went to the U of A. So there's a lot of connections to Tucson and Southern Arizona that we can take advantage of, and we are. So I feel, you know, the time spent here is well spent. You know, it is going to be a renaissance, and people will be returning.
Right. I don't know that it's how confidential it is. I've been hearing about it from so many different people, but the westerly side of Phoenix, which is 2 hours from here, which means that it's only 5.5 hours from Burbank, LA, to get to those sound stages over there, that it seems logical that the real big box sound stages would start over there. And I think that ultimately Tucson will end up with some element of that. But there's investors that are already talking about getting going on the sound stages, because the way the tax credit is written, I don't get this 100% correct, but the way that the developers that build the big boxes, if they have a 5-year lease, then they're going to be able to get involved on that tax film, or that film tax credit themselves. So,
well, Los Angeles has over 1,000 sound stages. You know, and New Mexico, I don't know how many they have, but they have quite a few. And there's not one soundstage in the entire state of Arizona. So that's why people are very anxious to build sound stages. But at the get-go, a lot of films don't need sound stages. You know, they need, you know, the terrain. And so the soundstage, the soundstage would be maybe phase 2 or 3 down the road.
For Tucson.
Well, the entire state of Arizona.
State. Okay. Yeah. Well, the lag time from the time that the bill would be approved to the first production that could occur in the state, for the amount of time that it takes to go through the tax credit process, is about how long? Is it as long as a year?
Again, every state is different, because the legislature pretty much sets it up, and there's usually an accounting system. And New Mexico has always been on top of the game from day one. And whenever there's a tax incentive that pops up in another state, they beat it. So we're not going to put New Mexico out of business, but because of our advantage of proximity, we're going to get quite a bit of business.
At least get a piece of it now.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Where it's gone off.
They'll be stopping off in Arizona, not going all the way to New Mexico.
Right. Well, the talent's closer to home too. If they're staying in the Southern California area, an easy flight into Sky Harbor or Tucson is just an hour.
About an hour, yeah.
And you're here, and you can almost commute doing that.
Right. And a lot of the the key people will be flying in. They're not going to be driving in. You know, you'll have your some of your cast and crew, doing that 8 hour drive. But most of them will be flying in and staying, in Tucson, spending money.
Right. On a fairly significant sized production, call it a small to medium, how many people are involved in a production of that size?
It can be anywhere from, I just recently did a feature film here called Majestic, and we had a cast and crew of about 60 people. But on the bigger productions, HBO shot here, it was about 300 to 400.
Goodness gracious, yeah.
So that's unfortunate. At this point, they have to bring in a lot of people from Los Angeles because we still need some qualified training programs.
A lot of the people that were here that did that had to move out because the business was
exactly.
Yeah.
They went to Georgia, they went back to California, whatever. But if we can do some training programs, people are going to want to come back to Tucson.
Tell us about the film that you're wrapping up, and you've got a premiere debut coming up on April 12th, and where it's at, and tell us about it.
It's Once Upon a Time in Tombstone, and we shot at Mescal, we shot at Trail Dust Town, we shot at your saloon, and we're putting it together, we're editing, and we're going to be having a premiere on April 12th at the Screening Room in downtown Tucson. And my goal is I would love to do one of these films once every month or two.
Sure.
These are low budget, independent, locally produced, all Tucson talent. And it's just a great exercise to get out and make movies.
Great. Well, I know that I bought my ticket for that, but tell folks
tell
them how to go get a ticket to this.
Oh, okay. It's eventbrite.com. Event is EVENTBRITE.com, and we've got about 40 more tickets left, and it's been going extremely well.
Oh, super!
And and we're gonna have T-shirts, and we already have the poster made up, and it's gonna be a fun night for a lot of the actors and some of the crew.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of work went into that too.
Yeah.
How many people did that one involve?
Well, we had 13. It was actually a workshop, and we had interns and workshop people, the actors, and you can tell we did it over the 5-month period. We did one day each month, okay, and the filming at these different locations, and you can tell how the actors actually improved, going through the process. And it's, of course, about Tombstone and the major characters that went through Tombstone, like Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Calamity Jane, and it's turned out to be a fun little film.
Awesome. And the ability that you've got to be able to bring talented interns in on a lot of your productions, how does that work? And if anybody's interested in doing that, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, actually, the university has shown a keen interest in training, and a lot of our interns are from the University of Arizona. They're studying film, but what we're giving them is an opportunity for hands-on with camera, with sound, grip electric, and all, just
experience, hands-on stuff.
Yeah, the nuts and bolts of making movies. So,
right.
We feel that we're working very closely now with the university. They're very interested in training students here, and if we can get films actually happening here, they don't have to rush off to Los Angeles for work.
Yes.
They can stay right here.
Yeah, and the editing facilities, I presume it's a little bit limited here because the industry hasn't really been here in a great way, but there still exists a certain amount of these kind of facilities.
I'm working with Southern Arizona Video, and it's a company that's got everything from A to Z to make movies. And there's quite a few people in town that have their own equipment and making films. So we have a good start. We just need more capital coming in to make better projects.
Right. Has there been any attempts? Is there any grant writing that has gone on over the last decade that has assisted?
Back in the 70s, I had a group called the Southwestern Film Consortium, and we went under the umbrella of the Tucson Museum of Art in the 70s. And I discovered doing a 501c3 is extremely complicated, and a long, drawn-out process. So, but eventually we did that, and we did a lot of educational programs back in the 70s, and we got grants from the National Endowment for the Arts.
Mm.
We got grants from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences,
Mm-hmm.
and they actually sent out visiting artists. Like George Papard came out as one of our visiting artists.
Wow.
Gene Kelly,
Mm-hmm.
Arthur Hiller, who was a director and later he became president of the Motion Picture Academy.
Wow.
And David Ward, who wrote The Sting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had some pretty heavy-duty people come out from the academy
Mm-hmm.
working with our students. Also, Billy Wilder.
Wow.
You know, we brought him out,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's another thing that we're trying to resurrect
Mm-hmm.
is that educational program with the academy. I've been back in touch with the academy
Mm-hmm.
about you know, hooking into their educational program,
Mm-hmm.
which they have nothing going on in Arizona right now.
Hmm.
It's all New Mexico and, you know, further east.
Right, for all the obvious reasons we've been talking about.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We have a mutual friend he's passed away now, but Bob Shelton. How did you meet Bob?
Well, kind of a funny story. When I was like 10, 11 years old, a lot of us, you know, my friends, we would take our bicycles and go up Gates Pass,
Mm-hmm.
and then, you know, just kind of cruise down,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually make it to Old Tucson.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, not having much money, we would always sneak under the wire fence. You know. Yeah.
Bob was the founder of Old Tucson. That's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Right.
That's funny.
Yeah. So anyway, one time, three of my friends and I snuck under the wire, and we're walking down Main Street. Nobody's there. Early in the morning, and we see this one guy walking towards us, and it was like a gunfight, you know. And you know, Bob walks up to us and he said, "Excuse me, what are you boys doing?" And we said, "Oh, we're tourists." And he says, "Well, that's really funny because we don't open for another hour." And you know, he said, "Listen, just make yourself scarce, you know, just you know."
Yeah.
And but later, you know, I started doing, you know, extra work and acting work, and I got to meet him. And then Mary Lou Murphy, back in the day, Bob and I, you know, kind of cornered him to form a Tucson Film Commission. So we more or less co-founded the Tucson Film Commission.
Mm-hmm.
Already Bob was doing so many movies,
Mm-hmm.
but we just brought in a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes. The experience that you've had and how the industry was a decade or two ago to how things are now, it seems like it's just gone from, you know, the dark ages to just all this computer generated, all this stuff that's going on. What do you see for the next decade or two in the film industry?
Well, I mean, it's hard to predict because things are changing so rapidly technically. But back in the day, of course, you shot 35 millimeter film.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they call it dailies, because you had to process the film, very expensive process. You had to work print it, and then you'd be able to view it the next day, okay? These days, as you can tell with this equipment, you see exactly what you're getting, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Back when we were doing 35 millimeter, you had to have a light meter
Mm-hmm.
because you had to, you know, gauge exactly your exposure.
Gee.
And you didn't know whether you got it right or not
Wow.
until the next day.
Yeah.
But if you had, you know, the right, you know, light meter and the readings, and I got to the point as a cinematographer myself, I didn't even need a light meter. I would just look and say, okay, the f-stop, and just set it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an interesting thing that technically there's some filmmakers that are going back to film.
Why is that?
Well,
Is it different
I don't know. I think it's a physical thing compared to an electrical thing, and just it's just a more pleasing image
Mm-hmm.
that you get with film. So Quentin Tarantino, the director of Batman, all those people, and I just recently had a talk with Photochem, and which I used to work with a lot back in the day, 35 millimeter.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, yeah, it's resurrecting, you know.
Wow.
And we've also talked about the possibility of working with students working with 35 millimeter film.
Gee. Are there
And Panavision still has 35 millimeter cameras, 70 millimeter cameras.
Is there enough of that kind of equipment still out there?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
Editing and
It's
everything?
laying dormant. It's laying dormant.
Oh.
But you know.
That is
it's-
interesting.
Yeah, it's coming back.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, the folks that have had the experience like yourself with that, I would think would be even be in more high demand, that it's already something you've, you know, sort of gone through the fire
well,
with.
you know, Kodak still makes 35 millimeter motion picture, 70 millimeter, which is, you know, the larger format. They still make 16 millimeter. So film is still part of our language, which is nice.
When you're filming 35 millimeter, do you have another camera or another element that records the sound, or does it all go onto the film?
Well, we have video assist where, you know, the cinematographer is looking through the camera, and then like on our cameras here, you have a, you know, a viewfinder. And a video, we call it video village, where the director can see exactly what the cinematographer is shooting. So that's more of a setup that you need to do when you're shooting 35 millimeter. So it's expensive and more complicated.
Yeah, gee. Well, it's been quite a great day here. I appreciate everything that you've brought in, and your crew, and the professionalism and organization of all of this.
Alrighty, okay, well, John, thank you
very much, Mark.
Thank you
Absolutely.
for doing this.
You bet. Thanks for your time. Thanks,
okay,
everybody.
That's a wrap.